Lighthouses aren't just towers of stone and glass. They're voices of the coast, silent guardians staring into the ocean's abyss, whispering, "Be careful. Danger lives here." Night after night, they save ships, families, dreams. But sometimes, they become the last place where a simple mistake ends everything. Today, we won't talk about heroes who rushed into storms. We'll speak of those who stood in the safest place on earth, inside a lighthouse, on solid ground, and still lost everything. Not to fate. Not to bad luck. But to one forgotten detail. One whatever. One glance away when focus was needed most. In 1893, on a rocky cape in Nova Scotia, stood Heron Island Light. Its keeper, John MacGregor, had served there for 20 years. He knew every crack in the walls, every gust of wind by name. One evening, as always, he lit the stove, but in haste, forgot to close the flue. The wind, usually just howling outside, rushed in like a serpent. It caught a spark, and within a minute, flames climbed the wooden stairs. John couldn't descend. He pounded the windows, screamed, but the shore was empty. By morning, they found him by the scorched door. He could have just closed the flue. One movement. And he'd have seen the sunrise. 12 years later, in Mendocino Bay, California, young assistant Thomas Lee arrived at Point Arena Light. He was given one clear rule: never step onto the gallery without a safety line in the rain. The fog was thick, the rocks slick as glass. But Thomas was young. He thought, "I'm agile. I'm careful. It won't happen to me." He stepped out to check the lantern, and slipped. His body was found 3 days later, at the base of the cliffs. He could have simply clipped the rope. One motion. And he'd have returned home. In 1921, in Ireland, at Bergen Head Lighthouse, a tragedy unfolded, one fisherman still whisper about. The keeper, old Finn, was ill. Fever rose, his head spun. But he didn't call for relief. "I'll hold on till morning," he told himself. That night, the light went out. Finn tried to fix the mechanism, but fell in the dark. They found him face down at the bottom of the spiral stairs. The lighthouse stayed dark all night. Meanwhile, a steamship with 42 souls aboard struck the coast. All because one man thought, "I'll manage alone." He could have just called for help. One action. And he'd have saved not only himself. In 1947, in Norway, at the remote Lindesnes lighthouse, a rookie named Einar forgot to check the kerosene tank. Full means it'll last a week, he figured. But there was a leak. That night, the light dimmed. Einar went downstairs to refill, but the door slammed shut behind him. The lock jammed. No one knew he was there. 2 days later, they found him unconscious. He survived, but lost his sight. Because he didn't check the lock. Didn't check the tank. Didn't leave a note. 3 small oversights. And his whole life changed. In 1972, in Australia, at Cape Byron Lighthouse, the cruelest thing happened. A young couple, tourists in love, snuck inside at night when the lighthouse was closed. They wanted the view from the top. No guard was present. The gate was just ajar. They climbed up, laughing, taking photos, then one leaned on an old railing. It gave way. The fall lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds, and it was over. They could have just read the sign, danger. No entry. 1 second of reading. And they'd have stayed together. There's a story few know. In 1985, on the Oregon coast, keeper Sandra of Sandy Point left the door open at night, not from carelessness, but because she wanted to hear the waves. That night, a bear entered the lighthouse. Not out of malice, just searching for food. The animal panicked and fatally wounded her. She could have simply closed the door. Not out of fear, but respect for the boundary between man and wild. One motion. And she'd have listened to the waves till dawn. Another case, in 1991, at a lighthouse near Niue Island in the Pacific. The keeper turned off the emergency alarm because it annoyed him. He didn't know that same evening, a fishing boat with a broken compass neared the shore. Without the signal, they missed the rocks. All 5 died. He could have just left the system on. One decision. And 5 families would have woken up with hope. In 2004, at Cape Flinders in Tasmania, a trainee didn't check the generator's oil level. "I'll do it tomorrow," he thought. But that night, the engine overheated. A spark hit the fuel line. The flash fire destroyed half the lighthouse. He survived, but lost his hearing. His mistake didn't kill others, but cost him everything: silence, music, loved ones' voices. He could have just opened the panel. 1 minute. And his world would have stayed sound. In 2008, off Cape Grimaud, France, a keeper received a storm warning. But he didn't believe it. "Forecasts are often wrong," he told a colleague. He didn't secure the lens, reinforce doors, or start the backup generator. The storm hit with such force it shattered the lantern glass. Water flooded everything. He survived, hiding in the attic, but the light went out for 12 hours. In that time, 2 ships lost course. One reached open sea by miracle. The other never returned. He could have just trusted the warning. One moment of trust, and saved dozens of lives. In 2012, off Mocha Island, Chile, a keeper left the furnace keys in his car. That night, strong winds blew the stove door ajar. Without keys, he couldn't close it, the mechanism required ignition. Flames escaped, igniting the fuel shed. The whole lighthouse burned. He stood and watched the light die, the light that should have shone. He could have just taken the keys. One habitual motion. And the light wouldn't have faded. In 2016, off Japan's coast, a trainee skipped the evacuation briefing. "I already know everything," he said. When a local rockslide began, he didn't know where the emergency exits were. He stayed inside, waiting. They found him in time, but he lost a leg to injury and cold. He could have just listened to the instructions. 10 minutes of attention. And kept everything. We often think tragedy is loud, inevitable, like a natural disaster. But usually, it's quiet. It doesn't knock. It waits until you look away. Until you say, "It can wait." Until you decide the rules are for others. But each of us is a lighthouse. Inside us burns a light, attention, care, awareness. And that light isn't just for us. It's for everyone sailing nearby, even if we can't see them. Because your one mistake isn't just your pain. Your one act of neglect is someone else's empty bed in the morning. Your "I'll manage" is someone's unfinished life. But the opposite is also true. Your "I'll double-check" is someone's hope. Your "I'll wait" is someone's smile tomorrow. Your "I'll listen" is someone's sunrise. True strength isn't in fearlessness. It's in not ignoring what asks for respect. Rules. Warnings. A gut feeling. The voice of reason. A lighthouse doesn't save because it's tall. It saves because its light burns steady, unflickering, unwavering. So it is with us. Our power isn't in grand acts, but in quiet, daily discipline of attention. In respecting rules, even when no one's watching. In saying, "I don't know everything, and that's okay." Once, a keeper wrote in his journal, "I'm no hero. I just never forget to close the door." In those words lies the wisdom of survival. True courage isn't ignoring danger. It's acknowledging it, and still choosing to stay alive. Not for glory. Not for heroism. But simply, to be here. With loved ones. With dreams. With tomorrow. Lighthouses don't burn just for ships. They burn for us, as a reminder, even in the calmest place, on the most ordinary day, your choice matters. One move. One thought. 1 second of presence. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to take risks. But you can be here. Now. Whole. Alive. Because you respect life, in yourself, and around you. Be attentive. Stay alive. And never think, "It won't happen to me." These words sound simple. But in them, power. In them, the way home. In them, the light that never fades, even in the darkest night. Because the real lighthouse isn't made of stone. It's made of awareness. And every time you choose to be attentive, you light it again. For yourself. For others. For those who don't yet know how close they are to the rocks. You're someone's lighthouse, even if you don't know it. And in that, your great responsibility. And your great honor. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to blaze to be seen. Just, don't forget to close the door. Because behind that door isn't just your life. Behind it, is someone's hope. Every day, you make thousands of choices. Most seem small. But it's from these small things that the fabric of survival is woven, from respect. From humility. From the willingness to say, "I'm not all-powerful. But I'm here. And I'm paying attention." That's enough. More than enough. The world doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for one thing: don't look away from what matters. Don't shut your ears to warnings. Don't dim your light, even when no one seems to be watching. You're a guardian. A voice of the shore. The last hope for those already losing their way. And in that, your strength. Not loud. Not flashy. But real. Like a flame in a storm. Like a beam through fog. Like a quiet voice saying, "Wait. Think. Be here, truly." Because being here means being alive, not just with a pulse, but with presence. With choice. With respect for life, yours and others. And in that, true heroism. Heroism without medals. Without fame. But heroism that saves. Every day. Every night. With every attentive breath. So next time you think, it's just a small thing, remember John, who didn't close the flue. Remember Thomas, who didn't clip the rope. Remember Finn, who didn't call for help. Their names aren't for fear. They're for memory. For wisdom. For light. Because light begins with one decision, to be here, fully. Consciously. Responsibly. Not because you fear death. But because you value life. And you know, it's fragile. And that's why it's precious. Every second. Every choice. Every closed door. You might think one time doesn't count. But one time decides everything. One time, and the light goes out. One time, and the ship crashes. One time, and the heart stops. But also, one time, and you save. One time, and you bring hope. One time, and you stay alive. That's why never ignore the small. Because the small is everything. In the small lives integrity. In the small lives respect. In the small burns the real light, not the one that blinds, but the one that leads home. Quietly. Reliably. Without fanfare. Just, shining. Like a lighthouse on a cliff in a storm. Like breath in the dark. Like your hand checking the lock just in time. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be here, with your eyes open. Because that's what real courage looks like. Not in jumping into the abyss. But in choosing to close the door. In choosing to clip the rope. In choosing to call for help. In choosing to trust the warning. In choosing to respect danger, and still walk forward. That's life. Not without risk. But with respect for it. And in that, your freedom. Your strength. Your beauty. So if you take one thing from this story, let it be this: I matter. My choices matter. My light matters to the world. Because it's true. You're someone's lighthouse, even if you can't see it. Even if you feel alone. Even if your flame seems weak. It's strong enough to save. Bright enough to be seen. Real enough to matter. So don't let it go out. Not from tiredness. Not from pride. Not from the thought, it won't happen to me. Because that's exactly how the most avoidable tragedies begin, not with thunder, but with silence. With whatever. With one glance away. Don't repeat it. Be the one who closes the door. Who checks the rope. Who listens to the warning. Who respects life. Because that's not weakness. That's the greatest strength. Strength that doesn't shout, but saves. That doesn't risk, but guides. That doesn't blaze, but burns long. And that's enough. The world doesn't need another hero leaping into fire. It needs you, alive. Whole. Attentive. Here. Now. With the door closed. The rope clipped. The signal on. Respect for the small. Because in the small, lies everything big. You're not just a person. You're a lighthouse. And your light isn't your glory, it's someone's hope. So protect it. Feed it. Don't let it fade. Because somewhere in the fog, someone's already looking for your beam, and thinking, just a little farther, and I'm home. That's why your choice matters. That's why your attention is salvation. That's why your life is a gift, not just to you, but to everyone sailing near. So be that lighthouse. Not perfect, but reliable. Not loud, but true. Not eternal, but here. Now. Whole. Because that's what real miracles look like, a person who respects danger, and still stays alive. Not for themselves, but for those who don't yet know how close they are to shore. You are their shore. Their light. Their hope. Don't lose it. Don't dim it. Be attentive. Stay alive. And know this, you matter. Your light matters. Your life matters, even if no one seems to be watching. Even if you're alone on a cliff in a storm. Your light is still needed. Because without it, there's only darkness. With it, there's hope. So never let it go out. Not from pride. Not from fatigue. Not from thinking, it's just a small thing. Because it's in the small that the world holds together. It's in the small that respect lives. It's in the small that the true light burns. Protect the small. Honor it. Because it's not small at all. It's your path home. It's someone else's path home. It's the light in the storm. So be it. Stay it. Burn it. Because that's what real life looks like, awake, aware, alive. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be attentive. Because that's where real strength lives, not in risk, not in, it won't happen to me, but in the simple choice, I'll check. I'll wait. I'll close the door. Every time you choose attention, you save yourself. And maybe someone else, too. You don't know whose ship is drifting in the fog right now. But your light might be their only hope. So don't let it go out. Not from laziness. Not from pride. Not from habit. Be here, truly here. Whole. Alive. Present. Because the most avoidable tragedy isn't the one that comes from nowhere. It's the one you could have stopped with just one move. You're not a statistic. You're a lighthouse. Your choices matter. Your life counts. Stay alive. Stay here. And never, ever, think, it won't happen to me.